Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you are watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. I'm your producer and co-host, Lisa Kinski, and joined as always by Francois Jaffray. Francois, how are you?
I'm great. I'm starting to get set up in the new podcast space, so yes. I'm excited.
I was going to say, for those who watch on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, you've probably counted now. This is the 5th different background for you?
5th, probably, yeah. Hopefully I make this the home base one. So I'm going to start to get more stuff behind me. And I don't really want to do the virtual background. So just get some physical things in there.
Not really a fan of those. Yeah. We can get you foams. We can get you plants. I have plants. I just put them on shelves too high to be able to see, or I need a taller couch or something. I don't know, but we can get some greenery in the shot. Well, with it, we are joined today. It is a lovely Wednesday morning. We finally have some sunshine. It's been rainy and gross in Atlanta. But we are joined today by the wonderful Emma Schermer Tamir of Marketing by Emma. How are you today, darling?
I am doing fantastically and very excited to be chatting with both of you this morning.
We're excited to talk with you too. I didn't get to ask you this beforehand, but I'm curious because I have this thing about being able to see people. It's not really a thing. I just have seen too many movies and make too many associations. But has anybody ever told you that you look like Emmy Rossum?
That's a first. So the only celebrity that anybody's ever told me I look like, who sadly has now been dead for quite a while, is Brittany Murphy. So I used to get that
quite
a bit, but I mean, I'll take it. Emmy Rossum is awesome. So
she's incredible. I love her. Francois, do you even know who Emmy Rossum is?
I have no clue. I'm the worst person to talk. I think everyone is every white male actor is Brad Pitt. So I don't know.
Yeah. Fun fact: Brad Pitt is from Missouri and went to school at the University of Missouri, which is where I live in Columbia, Missouri. And there's a bar that apparently he frequented all the time called Shiloh, which just also happens to be the name of his first child that he had with Angelina Jolie. So some speculate that this favorite night spot of his may actually be the inspiration behind.
And are you in Missouri now?
I am in Missouri. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
that's the one state, probably one of the states that I have not had the pleasure of visiting.
We are considered one of the flyover states, so it's not exactly a top destination for people, but I would say it's a pretty good place to live on a daily basis. No major complaints.
No, it seems great. So have you always been in Missouri? How did you find yourself there? Or did you move there? I mean,
it's like Missouri has this weird gravitational pull that keeps bringing me back. So I grew up here.
Okay.
And if you were to ask my younger self, I would have said, I'm never living in Missouri again. I need to get out. No way as an adult will I be back there. And I kind of bounced back and forth. So I've lived all over, including Spain, and studied abroad in Ecuador. And I lived in Israel for almost 3 years and moved back to Missouri about 5 years ago with my husband, Erez, who also happens to be my business partner.
Awesome. And how did you guys get into doing Marketing by Emma? Let's walk through your professional journey.
Sure. So I would say that I'm not really the born entrepreneur. I feel like those are a lot of the types of stories that we hear of business people are, at a young age, they were slinging things left and right, and they just always knew that they were going to own probably multiple businesses. That was not me. In fact, I was kind of afraid of business and didn't really think that I could see myself in that type of space. And it was actually very much my husband who, through his kind of nudging and persistence, finally opened my eyes to this world. So on our second date, he said, I don't know whether we're going to continue dating, but I can see how miserable you are at your job, and I'd love to introduce you to some people. And I was like, no. And so we're both very stubborn. And this time his stubbornness kind of eventually wore me down. And so rather than me giving in, I came home from a sales trip, and he said, okay, so here are a bunch of people that are interested in working with us. You need to contact them on Monday. And that was really the origins of Marketing by Emma.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
So were you in marketing before also?
I was, yeah. So I've been in marketing for a long time. I kind of fell into that as well. I've always been a very strong writer. And so it was something that when I would get into a job, even if I was hired for something completely unrelated to marketing, they would recognize that skill and they'd be like, oh, you want to help us write this newsletter? Feel like doing some blogging? And so the more that I was kind of dipping my toes into it, I began to cultivate more of an interest, particularly one of the things that I love most about marketing is the way that it really is a convergence of so many different things. So it really requires a depth of understanding around human psychology, and when from the writing perspective, also the craft of writing. So really it allows me to be able to explore all of those different interests that I have through a business lens.
And the group of people that he was just your then boyfriend?
So by that point, we had gotten married and moved to the United States. So we met in Israel, and at the time I was working for a startup in Israel. So also, like living that startup life, except as very overworked and underappreciated. But yeah, we moved to the States. We had a few other business ideas that we fortunately chose to abandon, and kind of kept circling back to this idea. I don't know if you're aware, but there's actually a pretty vibrant Amazon community in Israel. And so we had some different friends and relationships in that space. And my husband was really the one to realize, oh, okay, well, there is actually a very strong need for great writing that's not necessarily present right now. And so sort of through those connections, we were able to kind of begin to get our foot in the door. And then as things kind of happen in the Amazon world, if you do a good job, then people want to tell other people about it. They might not want to say what their product is, but they are happy to talk about when they have a positive or negative experience with someone. And so before we knew it, we were getting approaches from people in Australia and Kazakhstan and Brazil and all over the world. And it was just something that we thought would maybe be more of a side business or something to allow us to travel and work from anywhere, kind of grew into something far more than just him and I. And it's really been quite the ride.
That's awesome. So he came to it with, y'all knew about the opportunity in Amazon, and he said, here's these Amazon people that want to work with you.
Yeah, exactly. So he's really like the connector. He's definitely the relationship builder. And then I have more of the marketing background, and more of that sort of professional experience that I was able to bring into the Amazon world and learn all the ins and outs of what it takes to actually be successful with what you're putting on your product page for an Amazon listing.
And when was this? Because Amazon, of course, has evolved a lot in the past 10 years, but even a lot in the past 5 years. So when did you sort of get into the Amazon space?
Yeah, the end of 2016. So it has changed a lot. That was the time when everyone was maxing out their 500 character bullet limit. So you'd have these like gigantic, impossible to read, very keyword stuffed bullets that were just a huge mess. A+ content, at the time it was called EBC. That was really a pretty rare thing that only some more advanced sellers were getting into. So even just the sophistication of keyword research has evolved so much. And then, of course, not to mention just the extreme growth of the space on all sides, both with, the amount of competitors selling on Amazon and the amount of people buying on Amazon. So it has changed a lot. And I'm sure a year from now, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we were doing it this way.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot, but also there's so many different types of marketing within it, right? Like we mentioned a little bit before the show, actually. When it comes to like Prime Day and like the data and analytics and the PPC, that's one type of marketing strategy of just running paid ads. But it sounds like you're more so in that listing creation, the keywords that you include in your listing, in your enhanced or in your A+ content. I was about to say enhanced brand content. A+ content.
People still use the terms interchangeably.
So the EBC or the A+ content. But where else, I guess, would they have this content? Where else should they be building out any type of marketing? Because from my perspective, some of the ones that I've spoken to have been one-trick ponies where they just do PPC, and it's purely to drive traffic, purely to make those conversions. They may have some competitive advantage on pricing, or it's a very unique product within a very specific niche. But I guess where else should they be marketing their product?
Well, so let's even just take a step back to what you just said for a moment, which is that you said PPC to drive conversions. And I would argue that PPC doesn't necessarily drive conversions. It drives traffic. Mm-hmm. Your content on your page is actually what's going to be really responsible for impacting what percentage of that traffic is going to convert into a paid buyer, or even more so, a repeat customer. And I think that those are some of the things that the Amazon sellers that really have growth in mind, that are looking at not just finding a winning product and assembling a random catalog of items, like that strategy isn't as strong as it used to be. And so part of it is really being able to take that long-term approach and understanding, okay, it's not just about making the sale. How can I really build a brand? How can I make it so that, especially if I'm selling like a consumable item, that people are going to want to come back and buy it from me, not go on Amazon and just search those similar search terms. And then I'm going to hope that, I'm going to have placed myself high enough up on that page that they'll maybe click into the listing, see that they purchased it last time, have that moment to think back whether they liked it or not, and then perhaps add it to cart again. And so it's not only that it's necessary to do that because the Amazon space has become far more competitive, but I would even argue that Amazon is doing a lot more nudging to businesses to say, this is something that we need you to care about. And so when you're able to do some of those things right, you will also be rewarded by Amazon, which means that things like rank are not just impacted by what keywords you have, but actually things like how many conversions are you driving on those keywords? What is your seller health account? So they're factoring in the full customer experience and making sure that it's not just the best match for those search terms, but the best match for that person to turn into a sale that sticks. Because it's not really in anyone's best interest to make a sale if it's going to result in a return. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're always going to have returns, but if we can really make sure that we're doing as good of a job as possible to make sure that we're making the right kind of sales and clarifying things and making it easy for people to choose your product and know that it is the right fit for their needs, then you can really minimize that, which is going to yield stronger relationships, minimize the likelihood of negative reviews, it just can have a whole host of benefits. So I realize that didn't answer your question about all of the ways of marketing, but I think that it's necessary to first take a step back before you start adding and really thinking about some of those core concepts of who are you as a business? What are you really trying to achieve? What makes you different? And having really solid ideas about all of those things before you start adding on tricks and tactics and other strategies, because ultimately none of those other things will be as effective if you haven't figured out this piece first.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned something there I hadn't heard before, the seller health account. What is
the health of your, maybe my language was a little off, but essentially the health of your seller account. So, you'll have a seller rating, and that's impacted by things like your return rates and a bunch of other factors go into that. And so
Gotcha.
if it drops too low, then it can even influence your ability to list products and all of those things. So it's kind of Amazon's way of monitoring, are you in good standing with them or not?
Gotcha.
They don't want a bunch of people that are selling crappy products that, are they want to minimize those types of opportunities on their platform.
No, that definitely makes sense. I just feel like I've heard so much more about like IPI and from that perspective of things, because the inventory has been such a hot topic as of the last 12, 18 months, that I was like, they actually care about the returns and stuff? But of course they do.
If you get too many returns for a certain type of complaint, they might suspend your listing until you addressed it. So if you have a lot of complaints saying not as described, you are going to need to change your listing to make sure that you're not, making promises that you can't fulfill and things like that. So it is definitely something that you need to be weary of. And we've worked with people in the past to try to resolve those issues. And it's kind of a strange thing to think about from marketing. Okay, let's maybe hype this a little bit, but you don't want to say that you're the best at something if you're not, because all that is doing is setting your expectations, the customer's expectations here, and then you're here. And then that gap in between is all of that disappointment and anger and frustration that the customer is going to potentially feel. And nobody wants that. That's not good for any business.
Yeah. It's like what Francois says with dating: keep your standards high and your expectations low.
We did have that conversation. Again, I know that's how Kate went into our relationship, so I'm glad for it. But so how does, from the sounds of it, that sounds more like the copy though than it does the branding. To me, at least, like, how is Amazon rewarding you for having better? What is having better branding? Just having better copy?
I would argue that you're trying to separate things out when they're not necessarily totally distinct things. So your copy is a part of your branding. I think that branding is something that most often we tend to associate it with more of the visual sides of a business. So what is your logo? What are your colors? What type of imagery do you use? But I really like to think about branding as the identity of your business and how it operates in the world. And thinking about that from a place of intentionality and making sure that it's happening whether you are controlling that or not. So the more deliberate you can be, the better job you can do at really cultivating your business in a way that's going to be reflective of how you want it to be perceived. And so copy is a part of that. Copy is really like the voice of your business. Mm-hmm. So, thinking about your listing, not as just this static piece of writing and images, but really as an invitation for a conversation with your customer. So even though it's just sitting there static, the customer is having a back and forth interaction there, getting to know your business, but also obviously getting to know your product. And the better job that you're able to do both of those things, not only will you be able to have a higher likelihood of making that sale, but again, going back to really kind of cultivating a deeper relationship so that you're not just that thing they bought on Amazon, but they want to buy your brand's products when they need to buy it again, or when they're buying something in that category because they know that you align with what they're looking for in a business. So whether that's, your mission with sustainability, or they just love your story and how you came to be, we really like the opportunity to form those deeper relationships with brands. And we can aspire to be, an Apple or something like that. That is going to take a lot of time and thought and money and effort to get there. but it doesn't mean that you still can't be thoughtful about a lot of those things and see how you can apply those principles to your own business.
And when a company is trying to identify their brand voice, what are some of the things that they should take into consideration? Because, if you're selling, skateboard
microphones or something.
Sure. Well, I was thinking of more. I mean, something.
I looked at the microphone.
Yeah,
that's always my example on podcasts too, Francoise. Like, if you're buying a microphone,
well, we're constantly using water bottle, and I'm over it. I want something new.
The ping pong.
Look at that,
Ryan, great guy.
Ryan.
But if you're selling something that's maybe more of a fun item, and you want to have that kind of fun brand voice, I mean, how can you kind of convey that without maybe overstepping some unprofessionalism? Like, because you don't want it to sound like a 15-year-old wrote the listing, but maybe not be as savage as like Wendy's on Twitter. Like, what should you take into consideration when you're creating that brand voice?
Well, I think that some of what all of this comes down to is you do need to push boundaries a little bit. If you play it too safe, then what can start to happen is you can really sort of just dilute what it is that you're trying to say and minimize your ability to stand out from everybody else. So that's where it takes a lot of bravery to be able to really kind of establish something that makes you unique. And it's to try to first pin that down with voice, maybe kind of getting too far ahead. So before you get there, really thinking about some of those kind of deeper, harder to pinpoint concepts are, what are your core values as a company? What kind of future are you hoping to create through this business? What types of interests do you have? And then all of these questions that you're asking, you should be asking about your customers as well. Because again, we're talking about facilitating a relationship and a dialogue. And so while it's really important to know who you are, it's just as important to understand who your customers are and how to tailor your message in a way that's really going to resonate with them. And so that's where, when you start to have both sides, that you can start to dial in what kind of voice you want to use. Because yes, some of that will be unique to you and your brand, but some of that is also going to be, okay, what are my customers looking for? What will they really respond to? And so if it's a skateboard brand and you've decided that this is a skateboard brand for people that are just getting into skateboarding and are pretty fearless, maybe 15-year-olds are your target customer demographic. They're people that got an Amazon gift card for their birthday or the holidays, and they are so pumped to be able to buy their first skateboard. And so maybe like lean into that. Or perhaps you're selling skateboards that are for people in their 30s who want to reconnect with their 15-year-old self. And so then maybe it's a little bit of blending, but maybe also diving into the archives of your of what skateboard lingo was in the 90s, so that they can have some of those nostalgic memories to be able to engage in this hobby that they used to really enjoy.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to ask too, going back to something you said before about like the psychology of it, and how you can write those listings to kind of appeal to folks. I'm sure it's more than like ethos, logos, and pathos. Like there's more to it when you want it to like elicit a certain response. I mean, how it seems it's writing on a page. Like it seems like it shouldn't have that kind of power, like you watch a commercial. I mean, ASPCA commercials make everybody cry through imagery and music, but it's like to write compelling listings is really a certain skill set. I mean, how do you identify what to appeal to?
Yeah. So first, it's worth kind of giving some attention to the basics, which are less about the psychology and more about what are the things that somebody needs to know about your product and how can you make it easy for them to find that? Because they are not going to invest the energy in reading deeper into your listing or looking at your photos or reading your reviews or browsing your A+ content if they're not convinced that that product is going to meet their basic shopping criteria. So like if we jump back to Francois's example of a microphone, well, if you're shopping for a microphone and you have an Apple computer, you need to know that that microphone is going to be compatible with Apple products. But also maybe you want a microphone that's able to travel well because you're constantly on the road. And so you need it to be really professional, but you also need it to be really portable. So that starts to bring in a few other elements that are probably going to be where you start to differentiate yourself somewhat, because you start off with the core function of the product. So it's a microphone. But then if you add in compatible with Apple, portable, and professional, all of those details, which are going to be reflected in the design of the product, but are probably also going to be part of who you are as a brand. You know, maybe you're a brand that you're really wanting to empower small and medium-sized businesses that are looking to be successful in this new economy that's, you know, more remote and free and a lot of solopreneurs and whatnot. So if that's kind of your core mission and you're developing products around that, you need to make sure that those details are front and center. But then if you're also able to add the why behind it, so saying why it matters that it's portable, why it matters that it's, you know, for this specific group of business owners, then that's where you're also able to bring in the psychological aspects. So helping them understand what problems this is solving, helping them understand why this is going to positively impact their lives. And that's where the magic really happens. So knowing what they need to know and then connecting it to those deeper emotional drivers is what allows you to be able to invite them in and then get their attention a little bit more deeper. And then hopefully you do such a good job of it that they don't need to go browsing elsewhere. They're just like, yes, this is my product. I hate spending 5 hours trying to figure out which, you know, item I should get that's like $100 purchase. And I'm not going to waste that time today because I dig this company.
I think this is a really interesting conversation, especially to have with Francois too, because we were just talking to Matt Edmondson on Monday and again this morning about how he has like no brand loyalty.
I don't, but I mean, just putting the pieces together, it sounds like all of this can be done just through the listing, the title, the imagery that's part of those Amazon listings also, obviously. But it's something as a consumer, I don't think about. But also, I don't go and look for like a Shure microphone, right? I just look for a good microphone that's good for my Apple computer or that's easy and that's cheap.
So first of all, I think you say something really important here, which is that maybe your first decision is not brand loyal. But I would want to ask you, let's say that now you're looking for some accessories for your microphone. So you've already committed to a brand, right? Mm-hmm. Would you just kind of like start over, or would you maybe first look at products by that brand for your microphone?
I think that depends. And also, if I'm looking for something like that, I'm typically not going to be looking on Amazon. I'm going to Google it. So I guess I would start over. Like if I'm looking for a boom arm, I would just look for a boom arm for a microphone. I wouldn't say boom arm for Shure microphone and list the model of it. Now, if I'm looking for like an electronic, then yeah, definitely. I'm going to say like for my Apple computer or for my HP, or that has, you know, USB compatibility, something like that. Did that answer your question?
Well, but
would I be starting over?
I almost have a counter to that. First of all, I think it's funny that you hitched your wagon to Shure because these are not Shure microphones. These are Samsung.
I don't see. That's the thing. I don't even know what they are
because I bought them. So not sponsored, but we bought the Samsung Q2U microphones. And I think it's interesting that if we did need accessories for this, that you wouldn't immediately either search for Samsung accessories or type in compatible with the Samsung Q2U, because there's condenser, there's dynamic, there's like the Blue Yeti mics. If you want something that goes with the Blue Yeti, that specifically, there are boom arms that say works with Blue Yeti because of the design of the product. So would you not automatically go in and say compatible with this item that you're looking for a thing?
If it's something as specific as like the Blue Yeti, yes, I would say like for Yeti. But for these microphones, my perception is all these microphones are the same. They look exactly the same. They should have the same compatibility across the board. But yeah,
okay, so maybe your initial search wouldn't be specific, but then maybe once you started your research, you realized, wait a second, there's more nuance to this than what I knew, because I'm not yet and like very knowledgeable about this particular space. And that's, I think, a point that's interesting. And first of all, I'm not saying that everybody always makes choices based on brands. There are always going to be the price buyers, but there are also the relationship buyers. There are also the people that are somewhere in between, where in certain cases they could be motivated to just buy the cheapest. And in other cases, maybe they're looking for something more than just price or the star rating to help them make that decision, and they're just not given an opportunity to do so. And I, not to put you on the spot, Francois, but I have another question for you. Let's say that you're using a consumable. Maybe it's toothpaste. I don't know if you have a pet, so like maybe pet treats or pet food. But like, are there any products like that you buy over and over again? Or every time that you use something up, you just go back to searching the most basic search term to get that thing again?
It depends, because if it's something like deodorant, then yeah, I'm using the same deodorant every single time. I don't know who would switch deodorants every single time, or like shampoo, or
but people do. Some people either like trying different things, or they're on the hunt for their holy grail item.
That's risky. That's risky business.
I have to share, we have Ryan tuning in with some awesome commentary. First of all, Emma Schermer Tamir is a rock star. Have a listing problem. Work with her and her team ASAP. Also coming in with a snippet from a previous conversation you had, Emma, saying not to branding yourself is in fact a branding choice. So to not brand yourself is a choice. And then roasting you. Francois sounds like he buys Apple AirPods for his Android devices.
Oh Lord. See, that's the thing. I would buy AirPods specifically because I'm loyal to Apple, but Apple has a different level of brand recognition than I would say like microphones do. I'm just looking for something that has a lot of great ratings. I'm not going to dive into, hey, what is the story behind Samsung? And, are they historically a really good brand? It could just be they have 3 or 4 really good products that I see have tons of reviews. That's what I look for. But I guess in some cases, going back to your question, I will be loyal to very, very specific products. But these are products that have like very, very well-known brand names. It's not something that I'm browsing on Amazon and I would be loyal to.
But don't you think that that's maybe oversimplification of things, and that it's possible that there is space for more of those relationships to develop? So let's say you don't have a Samsung microphone. Let's say you have some up and coming microphone, and it just so happens that the more you use it, you're just like, oh my gosh, this microphone is life-changing. Like, I could have had the worst night's sleep, but it just always makes me sound like I have the warmest radio presenter voice. And like, it's like easy to use, and it just plays so nicely with all of these things. And if it does a good enough job of really blowing your socks off consistently, could it not become something that would start to move towards the Apple status? Because you said you're not brand loyal, but it sounds like you do have some brand loyalties. Mm-hmm. And so that would create an opening for other brand loyalties to emerge over time. It's just that maybe with your relationships, you play your cards close to your chest, and you only let in a select few who have proven themselves worthy of your
you read my horoscope? Yeah, no, I mean, I do agree. I think, but here's the thing, going back to Amazon, it's not something that I think I would find on Amazon. So I'm a sucker for advertisements in podcasts because I do listen to a lot of podcasts. And if I hear someone that I trust say, hey, go check out this mushroom coffee, my first thought is like, yeah, I heard it on the Joe Rogan podcast. Yes, I did. As controversial as that is today, whatever. I've been listening to Tim for like almost 10 years, whatever. But like, you know, he was talking about mushroom coffee and I looked into what it was and it has like half the caffeine, which I care about because I get jittery, you know, get some sweaty hands from it. And I have stayed loyal to that brand. But again, it's not something it's not something that off the top of my head, I'm immediately loyal to if I buy it on Amazon, unless I'm continuing to buy it. So going back to what you were talking about, the consumables, yeah, I guess I just came to a realization that for consumables, I would probably be brand loyal. But for something that I'm buying one off, like a microphone, I'm probably not, unless I'm running like a bunch of different microphones.
So you said something interesting, which is that you said you did your research after you heard it advertised. So it's not that you just took Joe Rogan's advice as sort of like, okay, this is it, purchase made, I'm just going to go and buy this. You said, interesting idea, let me go investigate this. So as much as the initial traffic came from Joe Rogan, it is ultimately how that mushroom coffee company was able to communicate with you that ultimately sealed the deal.
Right. Yeah, I guess their website was great. It was very easy and simple bundle offerings. They had a great initial price offering when I first saw it. And they had a lot actually on social media, which I enjoyed because I didn't know there was that much that went into coffee and how much people loved coffee. So yeah, it was that helped me convert.
So they understood our coffee is going to be really attractive to somebody that has an adverse reaction to too much caffeine, still needs that energy boost, but wants to avoid the jitters, the anxiety, and all of those things that can come along with if you're traditionally drinking coffee. So they knew that you're looking for that it's one of their strong selling points. And then they made sure to present that information to you in a way that reinforced all of that and said, yes, this is exactly what I want. And then they had a good offer. And so that good offer was enough to get you into the door. And then they fulfilled those promises so that by the time you were getting low, you weren't thinking about shopping around because they lived up to their promises and they were reinforcing that relationship. So I actually think that as much as you
I learned something about myself today. Yes.
that all of that is there. And if they had failed to really be thoughtful about that and, you know, present that themselves this way, not only on their website, but on social media, as you were saying, then they may not have even gotten that initial purchase from you. It may have just been one of those things that you heard about on a podcast, you looked it up, and then you're like, maybe one day, but I'm not interested right now. Because I'm sure you have those things happen as well. I mean, I have that happen where I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. And then I look at it and I'm like, maybe. Add it to my bookmarks and never return.
But I guess that sort of leads into the next point about where this marketing is happening. Because I know we talked a lot about Amazon, but would you recommend that brands that are on Amazon start to market off of Amazon?
I would say it's both, because also if you look at a lot of these brands, if you're selling on Amazon, the likelihood of your Amazon listing appearing pretty high up on page one, if not in the top spot on Google, is very likely. Regardless of the size of business you are, regardless of how many different channels you sell in. Like an example that I think of is Method Soap, which I think most of us were introduced to Method Soap through Target, because Target is really the brand that took a chance on them and helped leverage them into this huge, successful home cleaning products company. But if you search Method Soap on Google, they're Amazon listing for Method soap is going to be one of the top results. And so if we're talking about doing your research, it's possible that even if you're going to Google, you might still end up going to Amazon, especially if you're a Prime member and you purchase from there regularly and you like to kind of just like, you know, like, okay, I need soap, but then I also need some other things. So I'm going to add these to my cart. And then once I'm, you know, make my weekly purchase or whatever, that will just kind of be there waiting for me. And so maybe this coffee company was less of that, but also how many times now when you're listening to a podcast and they're talking about a product, or even it's just an advertisement on a podcast and it says found on Amazon. Some of those ads are even sending people to Amazon, even if it's a huge company. Like I remember I was shocked, and this is maybe a little bit PG-13, but like I was listening to a podcast and it was advertising, I think, Durex condoms. And it was telling people to go to Amazon to buy them for some new line of products that they had. And I just thought that that was fascinating. I think probably that somewhat speaks to just in general, people that listen to podcasts, because that's already kind of narrowing down the population somewhat. But if you think of a product, a brand like that, that's so widely available, and yet they are choosing to drive their advertising traffic to Amazon, that says something pretty profound, I think. And it might be the great fulfillment and the fast shipping and all of those things, but it is worth considering that even if you are selling across channels, that it doesn't mean that you can kind of neglect what you're doing on Amazon. Instead, what you want to be thinking about is whether you're just on Amazon or whether you're found in a million different places, that all of that information is presenting your brand in the way that you want it to and is cohesive and consistent, so that whether it's just one touch point that you have, or you bounce around and you start off on Google and then you go to their website and then you go to their Instagram and then you end up buying it on Amazon, that whole journey is a smooth one. Because at any point that it's not, that's where it creates this sort of friction that someone may kind of it might not even happen actively, but they might just feel something off. And whether it's like, oh, they're just trying to like make this sale and they're being a little bit overly pushy, or it feels kind of weird or manipulative or like infomercially, or, you know, any different number of things, or suddenly you felt really sure and then now you have a question mark, that's because something was off, something was inconsistent. And we have all of those sort of radars and abilities to understand those things in person with people, you know. So like when you meet someone face to face, they could be saying all of these things, but if their body language is saying something different, it doesn't matter what words are coming out of their mouth, because you're getting a weird feeling from them. So those same things are happening even with all of our marketing materials online. So with our copy, with our imagery. So if you say, we really care about developing the very best products and providing an outstanding customer service, and we take such pride in really being the best at everything we do, and then your pictures look like they're taken on a cell phone, or you have a bunch of typos in your listing, is that reinforcing what you're saying, or is that actually directly contradicting this commitment that you're making to be exceptional?
Yeah. That's and I mean, that itself has a lot to unpack. So I mean, going back to when you were referencing understanding your audience, I guess it's also understanding where they are off of Amazon and how to get them onto Amazon. Just drive that traffic to your Amazon listing. For example, Durex condoms, just getting them to their listing itself to make the sale there.
Can I ask, did you hear that during quarantine?
I think it was towards the end. I can't recall exact. I feel like it was late spring. I remember I was walking my dog, and I believe it was a little bit warmer out. So I want to say like April, maybe. So that starts to be kind of the edge of post-quarantine, or you've already been out of quarantine for a while, depending on where you live and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm just thinking how brilliant that is to tell people to go, because who buys condoms on Amazon? Like, you go to the grocery store or you go to the gas station. That's brilliant. And be like, hey, get them delivered to home, especially during
right.
Because nobody could. Well, I'm just thinking how brilliant that is.
There are certain
with your toothpaste
that are like kind of weird to buy in person. You know, it's like one of those things where if you can avoid having to have that awkward interaction with the cashier, then that's kind of nice.
Why not? Yeah.
Place the order, it arrives. You don't have to have any human interaction. So maybe that even like ups the likelihood of people being safe and protected if you encourage them to kind of avoid that uncomfortable situation. But they're not the only brand that I've heard that from. They were the first. And so I think that's why it stuck in my mind so much. And then I was really attuned to that. And I noticed that there were a lot of other companies doing the same thing, where even if they weren't driving it specifically to Amazon, they would also make a point of mentioning also found on Amazon.
Interesting. I'm sorry, Swa. I cut you off with your point you're making earlier.
No. I was just going to ask, so when you're working with your clients, what is one of the first things that you look for, or what some of the first conversations that you have with them about their marketing?
So a lot of this is really homework that you have to do first. So the deeper that you can do this homework with your business, the better job that we'll be able to do when you tag us in. So yes, we can make a listing that is really compelling and interesting, but if you haven't done that homework and really being clear about who you are and the kinds of customers that you're trying to sell to, then we're going to only be scraping the surface of what we're capable of doing. So there are definitely plenty of companies that we work with. They don't know any of this. We're able to help them achieve great things together. But I think that if you have an eye towards the sort of long road and building a business that you're able to really leverage into something more, then that's where these pieces become even more substantial. But the other thing is, and I don't think that people consider this all that much, but taking a step back and imagining yourself as an Amazon customer and how challenging it can be to try to compare products side by side. And so oftentimes, if businesses aren't doing a good job of that, then they're kind of forcing the customer to choose based on price or based on the rating or something else that's maybe a little bit arbitrary even, because you don't have that ability to do side-by-side comparisons. And it can be really stressful to even just understand, okay, well, what does make this microphone better than these 200 other pages worth of microphones? And it can really just be frustrating and overwhelming. And sometimes people are maybe even just going to go off of Amazon, where they can go to a store, Best Buy, talk to somebody that really knows about microphones, where they only have a few options and where it's not quite so overwhelming. And so this branding piece, and combining that with a really strong listing and being able to clearly differentiate yourself and draw those comparisons, can really minimize some of that stress and fatigue that customers can find themselves in, and can help make that decision and choosing you much easier.
Yeah, it's well, do they come to you with the strategies they already have in place, or once they understand sort of their branding, their voice, their target audience, all of this, then you would help them develop strategies?
It really depends. So we work a lot with very established brands that are known beyond Amazon, but they understand that the Amazon piece of the puzzle is really important to figure out, and they want to make sure that is going to align with the ways that they've built their brand off of Amazon. But we also work a lot with companies that have recognized the importance of figuring out this piece and really understanding how to have their branding be really solid and reflected through everything that they're doing. And so maybe they've gotten their business to the point where they have, a decent product catalog, they're demonstrating success on Amazon, but they feel like there's more out there, that they could be driving even more conversions than what they already are. And they either understand that if they're just competing with their PPC or price, that it's also a vulnerable place to be, because there could always be somebody come in and sell something cheaper. There could always, that's some businesses' strategy. They don't mind losing money until they send you out of business, and then they'll jack up their prices. So that's
Uber.
not, yeah.
Is it Uber?
Uber. That's exactly what they're doing.
All of those meal kits have that same strategy. I mean, actually, most of these huge startups are losing tons of money every year, because long term they're trying to really capture the customers, develop that loyalty, and then make themselves indispensable.
Yeah, like I got like 12 free meals from HelloFresh, and they keep sending me something for like, do you want 6 more free meals? I'm like, how is this free? This can't, there's no way. But like,
it is subsidized by venture capital.
That's, I think we're going to start to see some of that money flow into the online retail space, and specifically Amazon. I had a conversation with Chris Schifferling of Global Wired Advisors not too long ago. And he was just talking about the private equity that started to come into just the Amazon space and the e-commerce space. So, I think we will see a lot more of that, a lot more of brands that want to take it to the next level, are willing to take private equity funds and VCs eventually getting into this, and they're going to start to corner the market and own it. And your PPC won't matter. So and that's why this conversation of branding, I think, is so important, because that's really what's going to differentiate two different companies. But what level of conversion, and it's kind of I don't think there's a right answer, but I'd love to hear your answer. But is there a number that companies can expect to see if they're not focusing on branding versus if they are, in regards to conversions?
There's just too much nuance, and I really shy away from making any blanket statements like that, because let's say that you're selling something and it is really not competitive at all. You have the first mover's advantage. You're going to have the expectations of having a much, much higher conversion rate than being in a really, really competitive niche. Right. And so there's too much variety in there to really be trying to nail it down and say, you should expect X if you do this. Because it's important to realize that, yes, conversions might be one of the easier things to track, but those are also not the only outcome of being able to do some of these things. Because if you're doing this right, you'll also increase you'll have better organic ranking. And so then that kind of creates a cycle of, if you're ranking higher and then you're able to, just have more traffic and visibility with less PPC, or that it's the cost per acquisition starts to really go down. And so then you have extra money to be able to put towards other things, or you just have better profit margins. It's like all these things kind of feed each other. And so it's not always immediately visible in just one space, but can really have a massive impact on everything. And that's why, to me, really figuring out how to have a standout listing is so exciting, is because it's something relatively minor as far as the amount of time and effort it takes you to figure out. And the impact on everything else is so substantial. So if you could increase your conversion rate even from 20 to 28%, think about what impact that would have on your business to be able to do that. And then by doing that, what could you do next? Because if you're able to have, more capital to be able to either buy larger quantities from your manufacturer, or develop out other marketing strategies off of Amazon, or hire an expert to help you get into retail. All of those things could be made possible just by being able to increase your conversion rate by a few percentage points.
So it's very much a long-term strategy as opposed to running PPC, which is more of a short-term. Once you stop PPC, you're not going to probably see the same amount of traffic unless you continue building on that brand and optimizing your listing. And then when it comes to optimizing listings, do companies just track, I guess, how do you test listing optimization even?
There are different ways of testing things. If you want to really, really test it, then you can do A/B testing. Amazon doesn't allow you to A/B test everything, but it does allow you to A/B test some things. What I would always caution against whenever you're doing any experiment like that is just making sure that you really are clear about what it is that you are trying to test, and make sure that you sent up a proper scientific study so that you're not changing so many things that you don't even know what was truly the thing that is the outcome and what to take from that. So you can do those types of things, but also a lot of times it's not as complicated as it sounds. So if you look at your listing and you see that it is, it has bullet points that are way too long, or just a conversion rate that seems really out of the ordinary for your category, then you just updating that, just making some of those changes oftentimes has a pretty immediate impact on your conversion rates. So I'm talking about some of these other things. You should, if your listing isn't fully optimized, start to see some of the impacts of that work pretty quickly. It might take a little bit of time, but it you're not talking months here. So it's.
And I'm guessing that also changes over time, right? If your product is a seasonal product and you want to continue selling it throughout the year, would you, I guess, change your listing, or would you create a second listing for your? I don't even know if you can create a second listing for the same product, but would you advise changing up some of the keywords around different times of year?
Yes, I would. I would recommend changing keywords. I'd also recommend changing photos if you're doing seasonal photos. So, a lot of people like to talk about the gift element of a product. Mm-hmm. And so they'll create these photos that are very much Christmas time sort of gift photos. And then they'll just leave those up all year.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of weird to see, Christmas pictures in July.
Yeah.
It's just, maybe some people are super into Christmas, and so in their mind, any time of year is a good time to be thinking about Christmas. But what if you just, it wouldn't take that much extra effort to have another photo that you can swap out. So there's that seasonal element that I would advise kind of changing. I'll give another example really quickly, which is we watch a lot of TV on our Roku. And the advertising on Roku is really interesting because a lot of times it's just totally different from what you would see on primetime television. It's cheaper to get ad placements there, but there's an IKEA commercial that I was seeing even just a month ago, and it was a Christmas IKEA commercial. And so I'm thinking IKEA is a huge brand, and it's not slightly Christmassy. It is about the holidays, and it is talking about the stress about the holidays. And it's just you're just throwing money away. This is just silly. I can't imagine that anybody's seeing this. These are products that you probably can't even buy right now because they're so specific to the holidays. And it's not sentiments that anybody's going to relate to. And so it's just, it's off-putting. So there's that sort of seasonal element, but there's also the reality that a lot of categories are not stagnant. So if you were selling a keto product 5 years ago, nobody would have known what keto is. Yeah. So you'd be using a lot of paleo, maybe low carb, even Atkins might have been a little bit bigger at that time. And so you'd need to go more through that slant, because probably there were very few keywords around the keto space, and also very few people that really understood the benefits of ketosis. So if you did want to talk about that, you would have had to invest a lot more time and effort into customer education. Whereas now, if we fast forward, the keto diet is far more mainstream. You can go into a grocery store, there's sections of the store that have keto products. There are magazines about the keto diet. It has definitely saturated to the point where if someone hears the word keto, they immediately have at least somewhat of an idea. Like they might not know exactly how to do it or what ketones are, but they know that it probably means that you're eating a lot of fat and that you're not eating sugar. So, obviously that's an oversimplification, but then as a result of that, you would want to change how you're communicating around those topics if you're selling products in that space compared to what you would have had to do 5 years ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like there's so many different hats and things that an Amazon seller has to wear and do in order to even stay competitive in the space, which is, just, again, I listen to a lot of podcasts that relate to startups and they typically hire out for these things. So I'm excited to see that companies like Perch and Thrasio and new private equity coming into the space to be able to scale these up and permit, let's say, a merchandiser to be able to switch out those photos, or marketing to be able to not promote Christmas in July.
Yeah, what I was going to say, the sellers don't have to wear all those hats. They can just hire Emma and work with the Marketing by Emma.
Yes.
That's what they can do.
We're always happy to help. Thank you so much.
Well, and let's go on ahead, since we're at the hour mark, let's go on ahead and let folks know very fast. I know. Well, we spent about 15 minutes grilling you about your purchasing habits, but
I'm really sorry for putting you on the spot.
I loved it. I don't know about you. I loved it.
I learned something new about myself, so I'm happy.
But Emma, go ahead and let us know about Marketing by Emma. Do you work with any particular sized seller?
We work with all size sellers. I think the main thing is less about the size of the business and more about people that really want to be able to kind of get a leg up and create something that's bigger than just the hot trendy product to sell right now. So if you have that sort of idea of behind what it is that you're doing, then we are definitely happy to step in. So we work with everybody from brand new sellers to, like I mentioned, established, very well-known brands, and helping them kind of figure out this Amazon piece. And then, of course, everyone in between.
Fantastic. And if you guys have any questions about Marketing by Emma, you can visit them at marketingbyemma.com. Very simply, very directly put. It is on the screen, and we'll also have it in the description of the video and of the audio experience. And if you liked what you heard today or saw, please be sure to give us a like, comment, subscribe, rate us on Amazon. No. On Apple Podcasts. Yeah. I do that all the freaking time. Rate us on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars, and be sure to subscribe to us anywhere that you find the show so that you never miss a conversation with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Emma. Emma, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We've really, really loved the conversation.
Thank you both so much. I had a ton of fun, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
You too.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.